let's just use the opportunity that we do have. It's the only visitor center in any of the Nabatean cities. And actually, we shouldn't be calling them Nabatean cities. We'll get into that in a second. Somewhere in the 4th or 3rd century BCE, historians start talking about a mysterious group of people, mysterious people called the Nabateans. When I say historians, Herodotus, Hieronymus, later on, Josephus talks about them, and others as well. But all of these are Hellenistic and Roman sources, historians and writers, that talk about a mysterious group of people that live in the deserts of Arabia and the Negev. They are independent and free. They are religiously nomadic. They do not build. They don't plant. They don't drink wine. And just like descriptions of the Jews always focus on the unusual things, like they don't work on Saturday, that's unusual, we assume that the external references about the Nabateans are highlighting the things that are unusual. So the fact that they don't drink wine is actually very unusual. Everybody drinks wine. They don't. Everybody lives in villages. They don't. They're nomadic. Now, right now we have to open up and say that we don't have any internal sources about the Nabateans. The Nabateans, unfortunately, we don't have any sources that they wrote about themselves. We do have some writings, we do have some headlines, we do have some dedicating texts, but they're very short and they're not long texts. So we don't have the internal source. We don't have the Yosef ben Matityahu for the Nabateans, which would have been amazing, but we simply don't have it. What we do have are Roman sources and Greek sources and later on Jewish sources that do talk about it. Now, another thing that's described is their dominance over the trading routes in the desert and the fact that they bring myrrh and frankincense from southern Arabia all the way to the Mediterranean coast.
And gold?
What's that?
And gold?
No gold. And
From Yemen?
from southern Arabia, mostly Yemen, yes, all the way up to the Mediterranean coast. And from the Mediterranean coast, these goods, myrrh, frankincense, and other materials as well, are then scattered all around the civilized world of the time around the Mediterranean Sea. Why do you need myrrh and frankincense?
We need it for the pagans because they
Cover up the smell.
mostly.
And also
Okay, so
anointing.
Perfume.
Anointing, perfume, and other things. But before we continue, I'm going to give an explanation, and that's the common explanation, but we have to understand, again, I'm going back to the fact that we don't have good sources. So if you ask a pagan temple operator, why do you need myrrh and frankincense? The truth is they all need it. Why do you need it? We don't have a source that says we need it because. Okay, it appears in the Bible, the amounts appear in the Bible, it appears in many other sources, but we never get the technical explanation for why do you need it, except for it's holy.
What is myrrh?
So, I'm glad you asked, because it so happens that I have myrrh.
Oh,
Okay? And we have frankincense, and in a second, Yedidia will give me. Didi, is my nail?
yeah.
But I knew that myrrh it's a liquid.
So no, so both myrrh and frankincense are solids. These are the saps of plants. These are thank you. These are indigenous plants to Yemen and southern Arabia, a little bit in Somalia, and they are used as solids. It's the sap. You scratch the side of the plant and you collect the sap, and it crystallizes into these solids. And then there are many different ways of doing it, but essentially you burn them in the temple to create smell. What? And this sounds very
Yemen.
Yemen.
Yemen is South America.
And this sounds very almost esoteric. Why is it so important to have a smell in a temple?
Because present of God.
We need 15 minutes.
A few minutes.
It's a present of God.
Okay, so again, we think it's to mask or cover or hide the stench of death, because all temples, in a very basic sense, are slaughterhouses.
Yeah.
You sacrifice animals on a regular basis, you slaughter animals and sacrifice animals on a regular basis, and it doesn't matter if it's Akadosh Baruch Hu, or Jupiter, or Isis, or any other god. You go to a temple and you slaughter and burn meat, and the smell of the stench of all that blood and all that death around it, it stinks like a slaughterhouse. And the only way to operate a temple is to mask that horrible smell, because they couldn't wash or sanitize these facilities. Now, the problem, if the stench is too strong and your priest can't operate the temple, you don't have a direct line of communication with your God, whoever that is. And what happens then?
God gets
Earthquakes, famine, a disease, makat bechorot, all these different things, horrible things. And so that means that myrrh and frankincense aren't luxuries. They're necessities. And not only that, they're necessities on a national level. How much are we willing to spend for our national security?
Allah.
Think of your national security budget, and in the ancient world, part of your national security budget goes to purchase myrrh and frankincense. And if you understand that level of importance, and you place a nomadic people at the bottleneck of the supply chain, what do you get? A financial monopoly. And a financial monopoly is a great business to have. And that's who the Nabateans were for a certain period of time. They were the only ones that were able to cross the challenging paths of the incense route in any large quantities. Myrrh and frankincense were traded before the Nabateans appeared, but the amounts and the abilities that they presented and developed over generations allowed them to do it in a very large scale and supply these national security needs for all the nations around the Mediterranean Sea. Now, did they produce the materials?
No.
Not at all. Not only that, they weren't actually in charge of the entire route. The Nabateans only lived around here, or traded around here. Different people along the way handed these goods from one group to another. So there's no one person, we don't think, there was a single person that left Nabat, the city in Tehran, and walked 65 days all the way to the Mediterranean Sea, turned around and walked all the way back. No one was away from home for 4 months. Different groups of people did 10 days a week, 10 days a week, etc., and handed it over to someone else. So you keep going back and forth and back and forth. The most challenging part of this road, the combination of very harsh terrain and very hard climate, is actually this section where the Nabateans worked and controlled.
Isn't it that they thought that each section, they paid the other section for it and got their money for it along the way?
There was some sort of exchange, of course.
Yeah.
They're not doing this for free.
Yeah, and
And-
parts were more expensive than other parts.
So that we don't know. We don't have enough records for that. We do have some archaeology that came from here that describes the different people. We know they're not Nabatean. It's a similar nomadic way of life. They're all traders, and they're all basically Arabian, but their deities are a little different, and their kings or their rulers are a little different, and the conditions are very different. Some of this is tropical or subtropical. Some of these are high plateaus with plenty of water. It gets challenging when you drop down into the Arabian coast, but you can walk from one oasis to another, basically within a day's walk. The most challenging part is this section here, which is where the Nabateans
Why
control.
didn't use boats?
That's a great question. Why walk? Sail. It took until the 2nd century AD for Greek sailors to discover or understand the wind patterns and the currents of the Red Sea to be able to do that. Until that was done, there was a monopoly for people who could control this trade route. And monopoly brings in money, and money creates envy or a desire for other people to control the road. So Alexander Yanai, for example, conquered Gaza. And he conquered Gaza because he wanted a piece of the action. And the Romans didn't like the fact that the Nabateans controlled this road and kept getting gold and rich from this trade of a commodity that everybody needed. And they tried to control the road as well, and we'll talk about the end of the Nabatean kingdom later on. So if we understand this image, and we understand how the Nabateans started, nomadic people, they speak Arabic, they have their own language, they are independent, nobody can control them because there's nothing to conquer. When you're nomadic, if the legion shows up, the army shows up, all you have to do is turn around, run back into the desert, no one can chase you. You're the only one that knows where the water is, where the paths are. And armies from the settled world just don't know how to deal with that. And there's no city to attack. There's no city to put a siege on. You can't conquer Jerusalem and defeat the Jews. I mean, for the Jews, you can. For the Nabateans, you can't. At least not in those early centuries. Okay?
Was this the connection to Petra and the reason why Petra was like one of the 7 wonders in those times? Because so much money was pouring in?
Petra was developed on those ridges, yes. And Petra is their only city. It's their capital. Right, is independent bystanders, that's what they look like. We're going over there and I'm going to lower my voice.